Hey guys, tonight we will drift a little farther than your blanket and your bedroom ceiling, slipping quietly into a world of warm dust, date palms, and soft river air. You're not just listening to a story, you're going to walk slow, one sleepy step at a time, through the courtyards of ancient Mesopotamia, where lamps flicker on mud brick walls and the night smells like bread, smoke, and sweet fruit. Of course, if you were really dropped into this era, you probably wouldn't survive this. No air conditioning, no modern medicine, and not a single familiar comfort in sight. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Are you watching at midnight, on a rainy afternoon, or during a stolen nap break? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are already there, standing on a narrow, dusty path while twilight settles in a gentle, honey-colored haze. Date palms rise on either side, their fronds stirring in the river breeze. The sky above slips from blue into soft violet, and the first coolness of evening brushes the back of your neck. Your shoes sound muffled on the packed earth, each step lifting a brief cloud of dust that glows in the low light and then disappears, as if the ground is quietly breathing you forward. As you walk, the open land gives way to mud brick walls that grow taller with every few steps, guiding you toward the city. The bricks are sun-baked and slightly crooked, the color of toasted bread. Through a shallow gap you glimpse a courtyard, a tree, a clay jar on its side, a thin ribbon of smoke rising into the dimming sky. The view lasts only a heartbeat, but it leaves a small, steady curiosity in its wake. The air begins to carry more sound. At first it was only your footsteps and the dry whisper of palm fronds. Now there are low voices drifting over the walls, the quick burst of a child's laugh, the clink of pottery, the soft splash of water. Nothing is sharp or urgent. Even the busiest noise feels wrapped in patience, as if everyone agreed to speak more softly once the sun slipped down. The gate appears almost before you expect it. Two thick wooden doors banded with dark metal and standing open. A guard leans beside them, half in shadow, spear resting loosely in his hand. He studies you with the mild curiosity you might give a stranger who has clearly taken a wrong turn but isn't causing trouble. As you draw near, smells drift out. Warm dust, damp stone from the water channels, sweet dates cooking somewhere inside, smoke and crushed herbs. You take a deep breath, stall for half a heartbeat, and step forward anyway. The guard's eyes move over your face and clothes, noticing how you glance around as if someone might hand you a map. Tonight this place is in a generous mood. With a tilt of his chin and a lazy flick of his fingers, he waves you through. You pass under the beam of the gate and the outside world falls away behind you. Inside, the path narrows, pressed by higher mud brick walls. Woven reed mats stretch from roof to roof above, throwing down a shifting pattern of light and shadow that slides over your shoulders as you move. Your steps slow to match the city's rhythm. Doorways open directly onto the lane, dark rectangles just a few strides away. You see only pieces of lives, a woman lifting a basket of dates, a boy hurrying past with a jar on his shoulder, fingers kneading dough near a threshold, a dog dozing against a wall. Where the walls pull back, you glimpse small courtyards, a leaning palm, two clay jars grouped together, a low bench worn smooth by many evenings of conversation. Above, gaps in the mats reveal thin slices of sky, A single bright star has appeared, framed between roofs, watching while you walk. You feel the city noticing you, not as a threat, but the way a river notices a new stone and simply curls its current around it. To your surprise, you don't feel like a trespasser. You feel like someone returning by a route you once knew. The curve of the lane, the smell of fruit and smoke, the gentle murmur of water and voices all slide quietly into place inside you. The path bends once more, and ahead, a doorway stands slightly open, lantern light spilling onto the packed earth, a shallow bowl of clear water waiting just inside, as if this home has been expecting you all along. You linger at the doorway, 1 foot in the lane, 1 foot almost in the light. The bowl of water waits, just inside, catching the lantern's flame and holding it in a trembling little moon. You have a brief, ridiculous thought that you should knock, or announce yourself in impressive ancient Akkadian, or at least look less like someone who has been walking through centuries with no skincare routine. The decision is made for you. The door pulls wider with a soft scrape, and a woman steps into view. Her hair is wrapped in cloth, her sleeves dusted with flour. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes look like they were drawn there by sunlight and laughter working overtime together. She takes you in with one efficient look, dust, tired shoulders, uncertain eyes, and instead of asking anything, she just smiles, steps aside, and tips her head toward the inside. The gesture translates perfectly. You look exhausted, you belong here now, and she has no intention of arguing with fate. You cross the threshold and the air changes. Outside, the world was hot and dusty and full of distant shouts. Inside, the courtyard feels cool and gathered, like a breath held gently in the lungs. The floor is firm, swept earth under your feet. A short date palm rises from a square of soil in the middle, its fronds spreading like slow green fingers toward the slice of sky above. Clay lamps rest in little wall niches, their light pooling instead of stabbing. Nothing here glares at you. It just glows and waits. A man sits on a low bench by the wall, repairing a woven basket. 2 children lean against him, half hiding behind his shoulders, half staring at you openly with wide, delighted eyes. One tiny hand still holds a clay animal. The other grips a sticky half-date that has been completely forgotten. The man sets the basket aside and stands, knees complaining softly. He gives you a long, weighing look, the kind that decides if you are trouble or simply a story to tell later. Whatever conclusion he reaches, it seems to land on harmless and slightly lost, because he nods once, as if random travelers appearing at dinner time are fine. He gestures toward the bowl of water near the door. Even if you miss every word, you understand. Wash, rest, you are welcome. You kneel and slide your hands into the water. It is perfectly in between, neither cold nor warm, just the quiet temperature that tells every tense muscle it can finally unclench. Dust unwinds from your skin in brown spirals and disappears. For the first time since you stepped onto that dusty path, you feel almost clean. The woman appears at your side with a cloth, moving so quietly you barely hear her. Without fuss, she wipes your fingers, your wrists, and a faint smear on your cheek that you didn't know existed. She does it the way someone straightens a collar or smooths a stray hair, small practical acts of care that nobody comments on. One of the children shuffles forward, swallows hard, and holds out the rest of their date. It's sticky, a little flattened, and offered with deadly seriousness. You accept and bite, because saying no to that level of courage would be a moral failure. Sweetness spreads across your tongue, slow and sunny. The child lights up as if they have just successfully adopted you. You're guided to a woven mat near the palm tree and gently steered down into sitting. Your legs are grateful. Above you, a neat square of sky shows the first few stars, like tiny holes pricked into deep blue fabric. In one corner, a clay oven bulges from the wall, its bricks still holding a faint warmth that drifts toward you. From deeper inside the house, you hear the soft slap of dough on wood and a low, steady voice humming a tune that sounds older than everyone here combined. You feel suddenly aware of how out of place you must look. Your clothing slightly wrong for this world. Your attempt at a greeting dropping with an accent from nowhere. Still, when you manage a clumsy hello and a grateful nod, their faces crease into amused, kind smiles. The man repeats your name, turning the unfamiliar sound on his tongue like a new spice he might use again. The children echo it softly to themselves, tasting each syllable, turning it into a secret game. Food arrives with no ceremony, only habit. A shallow dish of dates appears on the mat, some dark and wrinkled, some freshly split to show pale flesh inside. A bowl of soft cheese follows, sprinkled with crushed green herbs that smell sharp and bright. Flatbread arrives last, a round, still warm enough to tingle your fingertips. Hands tear pieces, pass them toward you. No one asks if you would like some. The logic is simple. You are here, therefore you eat. The evening moves to a rhythm that doesn't need clocks. The sky deepens, a few more lamps are lit. Work shrinks into smaller motions. Someone finishes mending the basket. Someone sorts dates into piles. Someone rubs oil into a worn patch of wood. Voices drop without anyone being told to be quieter. The walls that felt like barriers from the lane now feel like arms drawn lightly around this little world. At some unspoken point, you are folded into that world. No announcement, no ceremony, just a new shape in the circle that everyone has silently decided belongs. The woman nudges a rolled mat behind your back so you lean more easily against the wall, then pats your shoulder once, brisk and approving, as if you have passed some test of can this person sit properly. The man, assisted by gestures and an enthusiastic child acting out very far away, with exaggerated steps, asks where your home lies. You gesture toward the vague horizon and give the simplest answer you can. He nods slowly. Far, then. Too far to reach before the lamps go dark. That is, in this courtyard, a perfectly reasonable explanation. You drop a date pit and it nearly escapes across the mat. Both children inhale sharply, scandalized. One shows you the proper thumb flick to pop the seed free. The other demonstrates how to fold bread around cheese so it stays put instead of attempting to escape into your lap. You copy them carefully. If you are going to time travel, the least you can do is respect the local snacking techniques. By the time your stomach feels steady and full, the night has cooled. The palm trunk at your back is rough and solid, anchoring you. Above, the fronds whisper with each brush of wind, like pages turning in a slow, patient book. You could fall asleep right here, inside this little bowl of light and voices and lamp smoke. But somewhere beyond these walls, the city hums in a low, steady tone, full of other courtyards and other doorways already waiting for you to wander in. Morning in the courtyard doesn't slam into you. It just gently turns itself up a notch. Light seeps through the palm fronds, soft and pale, and the shadows on the walls change from inky blue to warm clay. Someone has draped a light cloth over you in the night, the fabric smelling faintly of smoke and figs, as if they were quietly worried that time travelers might catch a chill. You sit up slowly, bones protesting just enough to remind you that you slept on woven mats, not your usual mattress. For a moment, your brain does that confused little shuffle. Unfamiliar sky, palm leaves, mud brick walls. Right, Mesopotamia, not your apartment. Across the courtyard, the children are already awake and deeply committed to some new game involving a clay animal, a reed boat, and rules that conveniently change whenever one sibling starts losing. The woman moves through the space with quiet certainty, rolling mats, straightening jars, checking the dome of the oven. Her humming threads through the morning like a low, comforting line of music. By the doorway, the man you shared bread with stands in the slant of early light, adjusting the belt at his waist. He watches the lane outside with the thoughtful look of someone mentally shuffling tasks, weather, and the sudden addition of one lost traveler. When he notices you watching, his face softens into a quick, warm smile. More, "Oh good, you're still here," than, "Why are you still here?" He gestures upward at the brightening sky, then sweeps his hand outward, away from the courtyard, tracing a long, invisible path. The gesture has the easy clarity of a picture book. Out there, beyond the walls, there is something flowing, and he intends to show it to you. Even without shared language, the message is clear. Come see where this courtyard's life really starts. You rinse your face and hands again at the water bowl, the cool touch chasing away the last threads of sleep. The smaller child supervises this with grave seriousness, ready to intervene if you somehow misuse basic liquid. When your splashing technique passes inspection, the man touches your shoulder with a light, companionable pat and leads you through the doorway into the lane. The city at this hour feels like a person stretching after a long nap. Some doorways stand open, letting out thin trails of smoke, the faint smell of baking bread, and voices still too sleepy to rise above a murmur. The woven reed mats above throw striped shadows onto the packed earth, and slanting sunlight turns the floating dust into small drifting sparks. Somewhere a donkey brays like it has been personally wronged by dawn. You follow your host through a series of turns that you will absolutely not remember later. Left at the cracked wall, right past the doorway with the hanging jar, straight through the little wedge of lane where someone has lined up 3 water pots like sleepy sentries. You glimpse other courtyards in passing, someone sweeping, someone tying a belt, someone laughing as they chase a chicken that has absolutely no respect for property lines. Greetings are exchanged above your head, a quick call here, an answering wave there. You are noticed, but not questioned, the way you notice a new stray cat walking comfortably with an old one. Before you see the river, you hear it. Not a roar, nothing dramatic enough for movie trailers, but a layered murmur, like several soft conversations happening at once. The lane widens and slants downward. The air cools, picks up the smell of wet clay and green things that spent the night quietly drinking. When the last of the walls fall away, the city seems to open its hand and show you its calm. The river lies broad and unhurried before you, moving with the slow confidence of something that has been here for longer than anyone remembers and has no plan to rush for anyone. Along its edge, narrow channels peel away, thin ribbons of water leading off between rows of date palms and low, patient fields. Your host leads you toward one of these channels where an older man sits on a flat stone, as if he simply grew there with the reeds. His beard is mostly silver, his eyes not at all. He looks up as you approach, takes in your unfamiliar clothes, your half-awake shuffle, and smiles with the calm amusement of someone who has decided that strange visitors are just another kind of weather. He and his host trade a few words and a short laugh. Then the elder pats the stone beside him and nods, inviting you to sit down at the edge of this watery classroom. From here, the whole system spreads out in front of you. Men with simple tools move small mounds of earth, letting more water into one patch, less into another. Children run along the narrow banks of the ditches with arms stretched out, balancing with the effortless grace of people who grew up walking the edge between wet and dry. Women in long robes move between palm trunks, loosening soil, checking roots, talking quietly as they work. It is busy, but never frantic. The whole scene feels like breathing. Inhale, exhale, adjust. The elder picks up a reed and in the damp earth between you draws a straight line from your foot outward. He looks at it for a moment, then wipes it away with his palm and draws another, this time bending and splitting, adding little branches. He points from the sketch to the real channels. You don't need vocabulary to understand the lesson. A wild river goes where it wants and breaks what it pleases. A guided river becomes many smaller, calmer gifts. He gestures upriver to a low cluster of stones and stakes interrupting the flow and begins to speak. His voice is slow and even, like the water itself. You catch only scattered words, but his hands fill in the rest, fingers lifting high to show water rising, sweeping wide to show it spilling, then shaping invisible walls and channels as he describes people working through the night. It's a story of a flood that came earlier and stronger than expected, and how the city listened, learned, and changed its patterns so the next time the water met more walls and fewer sleeping mats. You realize there's been a small knot in your chest ever since you first stepped through that gate, a quiet worry about how fragile this place might be, how one bad season could undo it all. Apparently, your face is holding a full committee meeting about that worry, because the elder pauses, studies you, and then chuckles softly. He taps his reed against the earth, then points at the neat, new green shoots in the fields, at the heavy dates hanging above, and at the children in the distance as one of them misjudges a step and splashes one foot into the channel. Your heart jumps for just a second, imagining the worst. But the boy only yelps, then laughs, lifting his wet foot and wobbling back onto the bank. His friends tease him with the ruthless affection of siblings everywhere. An older woman calls out something that makes them all snort. The water, completely uninterested in this drama, keeps flowing along its allotted path. The world doesn't end. It just ripples once and smooths itself flat again. The elder dips his hand into the channel and lets the water stream through his fingers. He catches one shining drop on his fingertip, then reaches out and presses that cool dot to the back of your hand. Afterward, he taps the damp soil with his reed, taps the trunk of the nearest palm, and then taps your shoulder with the same gentle insistence. You, land, tree, water. Not separate things, but parts of the same long, patient agreement. He rises slowly, joints clicking like old hinges, and beckons you to walk with him along the ditch. You follow at the narrow edge, river on one side, fields on the other. Now and then he nudges a clod of earth with his foot, and the water obediently shifts, sending a little more toward a thirsty patch of ground. When he motions for you to try, you copy him, feeling faintly ridiculous, right until you see the thin stream swing in the new direction and darken the dry soil. It doesn't feel like much. It is not dramatic or heroic. But as you look out over palms, fields, distant courtyards, you understand that this whole world rests on thousands of these tiny daily corrections, hands and feet quietly telling the river, this way, a little more, a little less. The elder keeps talking as you walk, and even when you miss the words, you hear the tone. Pride, patience, affection. The river hums on your left, the fields breathe slowly on your right, and for the first time since you stumbled under that city gate, you feel not like an accident that fell out of its own time, but like a temporary thread woven into a pattern that has been flowing here, steady and unbothered, for longer than anyone remembers. You sleep so deeply after the long day by the water that when you first wake, you have no idea where you are. There is the faint crackle of an oven, the rustle of palm leaves, the soft sigh of someone rolling over on a mat nearby. Then the square of sky above the courtyard comes into focus, dark velvet just starting to fade at the edges. It is that small, fragile hour when night is tired and morning is still thinking about it. A lamp glows in its wall niche, flame turned low and lazy. Your host crouches beside you, already belted and sandaled, eyes far too awake for the time of day. He taps your ankle with his toe, sketches a round shape in the air, then mimes taking an enormous bite. Bread. He hooks a thumb toward the lane. Market. Adventure. You, still mostly blanket, apparently have no veto power. You sit up, joints protesting like you've been sleeping on woven mats instead of your usual mattress, which, to be fair, you have. The woman is already moving through the courtyard, because of course she is. She presses a scrap of yesterday's flatbread into your hand and says something that sounds suspiciously like a comment on how slowly you stand. Her eyes are warm, though, and she gives your shoulder a quick squeeze that translates perfectly. You'll live. Bare feet on cool earth, you follow your host out into the dim lane. At this hour, the streets feel like secret hallways. Shadows lean long against the mud brick walls, and the reed coverings overhead catch the last of the night, turning it into a soft silver grid. Here and there, doorways yawned wide, spilling out heat and orange light. Clay ovens glow in each opening like small tamed suns. The air smells of smoke and yeast and that deep, flowery warmth that makes your stomach suddenly remember it has opinions. Your host leads you to one of the ovens. The baker is broad-shouldered, dusted in flour, and radiates the energy of someone powered entirely by bread and stubbornness. He gives you a long look, snorts once, and returns to work. With quick, economical movements, he tears off a lump of dough, slaps it onto a board, and stretches it into a near-perfect circle. In the oven mouth, flatbreads cling to the clay walls, blistering and puffing, their bubbles catching the firelight like tiny moons. Then he presses a smaller lump into your hands. It immediately droops, as if it knows you have no idea what you are doing. You try to copy the motions, pinch, stretch, turn, but your circle very quickly becomes a shape that can only be described as regret. The baker watches, lips twitching. At last he catches your hands in his, big and warm and rough with work, and guides your fingers. Press here, tug there. Don't be so gentle, it's dough, not glass. Under his direction, the blob slowly evens out into something almost respectable. The heat rolling out of the oven is intense, like opening the door of a very opinionated dragon. When he nods for you to stick your dough to the inside wall, every instinct you have says, "No thank you, I enjoy my skin." He mutters something that clearly means, "Don't be dramatic," positions your arm, and together you smack the round onto the hot clay. For a single heartbeat, you are certain you've lost your eyebrows and the entire neighborhood's breakfast. Then the dough clings, begins to puff, and the baker thumps your shoulder once, firmly. One flatbread, offered by the strange guest. Crisis averted. The work settles into a rhythm. Pinch, stretch, smack. Wait, then slide in a hooked tool and peel the breads free, dropping them into a woven basket with soft, heavy thumps. Steam curls up, carrying the smell of toasted wheat and a hint of char. Your host tears one open while it is still almost too hot to touch and passes you half. You bite in anyway. The bread is chewy and smoky and so outrageously good that you make a noise you hope no one heard. Everyone hears. Everyone laughs. When the basket is full, the baker nods at you to pick it up, as if this has been your job the whole time. You heft it against your hip and instantly discover that basket of bread means portable workout. Heat seeps through the reeds, soaking into your side like a small, calm sun. Your host smirks, but lets you keep carrying it. Apparently, hauling carbohydrates before dawn is an important part of your time travel experience. Out in the lanes, a quiet stream of people moves toward the center of the city. Other bakers with baskets, women balancing trays of figs and herbs, a boy with clay jugs that clink together like sleepy bells. No one barks orders. Everyone simply adjusts, folding around one another, the way streams fold together into a river. The streets widen, the overhead mats fall away, and ahead the marketplace appears, still mostly shadow, stalls of wood and woven reed standing like patient outlines. You claim a spot near a sturdy post. The baker arranges the loaves with neat, almost ceremonial care, then promptly flicks a crumb off your tunic, restoring the proper level of humility. Around you, neighbors set out their goods: figs stacked in spirals, herbs piled in green mounds, strings of onions catching the dim light. For a few minutes, the square hums softly, everyone talking in the backs of their throats, as if there is an unspoken rule not to scare the day away too fast. The first customers drift in, workers grabbing bread to tuck into belts, children on very serious errands, a woman who inspects every loaf as if choosing a husband, then takes the same size she took yesterday. Coins clink, jokes pass in low voices. Someone haggles with a fierceness that still ends in laughter. Your host folds you into it all without comment. When your basket tilts, he nudges it straight. When your attention wanders, he somehow presses another small piece of bread into your hand exactly when you need it. A skinny dog sidles up, nose twitching. A scrap of crust slips from the basket and lands by your foot. You and the dog reach for it at the same moment and freeze, nose to nose. For a second, you imagine chaos, barking, shouting, accusations of bread theft. Instead, the dog blinks slowly and sits, regarding you with professional interest. You break the crust in half and offer a piece. He accepts with grave dignity, then flops down at your feet, tail thumping your ankle in a slow, steady rhythm. Your host rolls his eyes, but the next time a piece falls, he nudges it toward your new ally with the side of his sandal. Above, the sky lightens from charcoal to soft blue. Sunlight seeps over the roofs, catching the steam that rises from the loaves and turning it into brief, glowing columns. The murmur of the market thickens, not harsh, just fuller, as if someone is turning the volume knob very gently. You stand there with flour on your hands and warmth against your side, listening to the city wake around you, and realize that for this moment, the wild impossibility of time travel has settled into something beautifully ordinary. You woke up too early, helped with breakfast, and are watching the day begin while the ancient world slowly remembers its own name. The market slowly empties, and your basket grows lighter, while your arms grow heavier, pleasantly sore from carrying warm loaves. Your host claps the flour from his hands, sharing a last quiet joke with the baker that makes both men huff with sleepy amusement. He jerks his chin toward the lane, already turning to go, trusting you to follow. Behind you, the skinny dog lies down with a dramatic sigh, as if you have personally shut down his favorite restaurant. The streets are fully awake now, washed in bright sun. Children weave between adults with jugs and baskets, somehow avoiding every collision you are sure must happen. Someone calls for more water. Someone else laughs at a joke you'll never quite decode. The smell of bread joins stew, herbs, smoke, and that faint coolness where irrigation has darkened the dust. When you step back into the familiar courtyard, the air feels a few degrees softer. Mats have been rolled, jars stacked, tools leaned in their rightful corners, as if everything knows exactly where to rest between tasks. The date palm in the center spreads a small island of shade, its fronds breaking the light into moving green stripes. Under that shade, your hostess sits with two neighbors, baskets of dates before them, tidy bundles of reed at their feet. Their fingers move steadily, sort, split, weave, repeat. They all glance up as you enter. Your hostess pats the ground beside her and draws another basket into the circle. When you sit, she slides it toward you with the faintest smile, like she is quietly amused by how surprised you still are to be included. No words you share, but the message is fluent. Welcome back. Now you can help. You watch their hands for a moment. Each woman lifts a date, presses it, turns it once, then drops it into the proper pile, ripe, not yet, dried, no hope. Now and then a particularly perfect fruit detours straight into someone's mouth, which seems like the most honest form of inspection. When you try, though, you treat each date like a complex life decision. One slightly squishy piece shuffles between two piles so many times it should earn frequent traveler points. The woman on your left finally intervenes. She takes the poor date, gives it one quick, decisive squeeze, and drops it where it belongs. Then she taps the back of your hand, eyes sparkling. It's just fruit, her look says, not fate. You breathe, laugh softly at yourself, and let your hands stop overthinking. Soon the movement turns smooth. Pick, press, drop, breathe. The courtyard narrows to small sounds. Outside, donkeys complain and sellers shout, but here it's only the quiet thump of dates and baskets, the scratch of reeds being split, the soft rise and fall of women's voices. You don't understand every word, but you recognize the shapes of ordinary stories. Someone's noisy neighbor, a child who refuses to nap, a husband who tried to fix something and definitely made it worse. Every so often they tilt their heads toward the lane or roll their eyes in unison, and you follow their gaze, laughing even before you know why. After a while, your hostess nudges your basket aside and gathers a bundle of reeds. She lays a few across her lap and begins to weave, over, under, under. Her fingers are so practiced that the movement looks lazy, but a mat slowly appears, tight, even, with a faint zigzag pattern like ripples caught in straw. She hands you a small, half-started square and a handful of strips, then points to the pattern, then to your hands. Your turn. You start well enough. Over, under, pull, over, under? You lose track. The straight lines begin to wobble. The neat zigzag turns into a slightly confused worm. You try to bully the reeds into obedience. They respond by folding and twisting just out of alignment. Your neighbor on your right leans over, studies your mat, studies your very serious expression, and lets out a tiny laugh. She taps the crooked rows, then taps her own chest and mimes chubby, clumsy child fingers. Everyone begins here, her gesture says. You're right on schedule. The little disaster arrives when you yank one strand too hard. The edge of your mat collapses inward, dragging a section of the pattern into a knot. At the same moment, your knee bumps your carefully organized date basket, sending a few fruits rolling across the packed earth. One bumps the palm trunk, another heads determinedly toward the doorway, hell-bent on freedom. You freeze, already imagining you've broken some ancient rule about respecting dates. But the courtyard reacts with practiced ease. One woman calmly stops a runaway fruit with her heel, another scoops one up mid-roll. Your hostess catches the last escapee as if plucking it from the air were the easiest thing she'll do all day. Then everyone looks at everyone else and laughs together, the brief tension dissolving as quickly as it arrived. Your hostess picks up your unfortunate mat and inspects it with solemn exaggeration, like a healer humoring a dramatic patient. With a few efficient motions, she unknots the worst part and straightens the edges. When she hands it back, she slows her own hands, making each over and under big and obvious. Her fingers are saying what her words don't. Slower. The world is not waiting on this mat. So you slow down. Over, under, pull, breathe. The reeds slide against each other with a dry, papery whisper. Your fingertips begin to feel the right amount of pressure, the moment when a strand has settled exactly where it wants to be. The pattern is still crooked, but the crookedness starts to look intentional, more like a small wave than a mistake. Your thoughts, which have been racing since you first stepped through the gate, finally match the pace of your hands. In the middle of a row, one of the women begins to hum. It's a low looping melody, easy enough that the others join without thinking. Their voices weave in and out, calm as the canals that run beyond the walls. You catch a word here or there, palm, water, house, names, and even without understanding the whole, the song folds around you like shade. The courtyard feels sealed off from the louder parts of the day, floating on its own gentle current. By the time the sun has leaned past the middle of the sky, your fingers are lined with pale reed marks, and your practice mat is, against all odds, presentable. Your hostess examines it, squints one last time, then nods. She lays it on the ground beside her and smooths its edges as if it has earned its place. Then she fills a small bowl with the plumpest dates and sets it firmly on top of your mat. The gesture is simple, but it lands deep. This uneven thing your hands made now carries sweetness into the center of their circle. Anyone who reaches for a date will reach over your work. You lean back against the cool wall, dust on your clothes, the song still winding quietly around you, and feel a small, steady pride unfurl. You take one of your dates and bite in. It is soft and sun-heavy, the sweetness arriving slowly like the afternoon itself. Around you, the women keep sorting and weaving, talking and teasing, their hands never really stopping. The little courtyard breathes in shade and breathes out warmth. And between one over and under and the next, you realize that, at least for this afternoon, you are not just a visitor dropped in from somewhere impossible. You are one more pair of hands moving in time with everyone else, quietly helping the day stitch itself together. By late afternoon, the courtyard grows softer, as if the day is folding itself neatly away. Reed bundles are tied, baskets of dates pushed against the wall, brooms whisper over the packed earth. The palm's shadow stretches long and thin, reaching across sleeping mats and the low oven, wrapping the space in drifting stripes. Your hands are dusty, your shoulders pleasantly tired, and for once your mind isn't sprinting ahead of itself. Your host appears in the doorway, freshly rinsed, tunic smoothed. He touches 2 fingers to his chest, then lifts them toward the sky with a small, questioning tilt of his head. Temple time? Before you can overthink it, your hostess presses a small clay jar into your palms. Even through the lid, a resinous sweetness leaks out. Pine, smoke, and something darkly honeyed. She mimes inhaling with theatrical delight, then gives you a gentle push toward the lane. Apparently, you're going. Outside, the city has lowered its voice. The loud bargaining is over. What's left are end-of-day sounds. Doors closing, jugs being filled, quiet conversation in doorways. Light lies warm and amber on the mud brick, making every thumbprint and crack glow for a little while. You follow your host past landmarks you're starting to recognize. The fat jar by the crooked wall, the doorway where someone is always sharpening something, the sleepy dog who has clearly decided to adopt the entire street. The lane widens into a small square, and there it is, no towering ziggurat, just a solid, thoughtful building sitting a little apart from its neighbors. 2 carved lions crouch by the doorway, paws outstretched, manes stylized into neat curls. They stare straight ahead with the weary patience of creatures who have watched generations arrive late, forget offerings, and trip over their own sandals. Your host bows his head as he passes. You copy the gesture, trying not to poke yourself in the eye. The lions, mercifully, neither blink nor smite. Inside, shade gathers quickly, wrapping you like cool cloth. The air tastes different here. Oil, old stone, and the faint tang of spent smoke. City noise falls away to a soft murmur. Clay lamps sit in wall niches, their little flames bright but not harsh, each one a quiet comma in the dim. A young caretaker with ash-dusted fingers glances at the jar you're clutching like a dropped assignment, then grins and beckons you along a short passage. The floor under your sandals changes from familiar earth to worn stone. The coolness seeps up into your legs, slowing each step. The passage opens into an inner courtyard, a square of sky framed by columns and shadow. In the center stands a simple altar. No towering statue, no impossible throne, just a flat stone surface carrying small gestures. A bowl of grain, a cluster of figs, a folded scrap of cloth, a twig of leaves resting in a tiny jar of water. Around the edges, priests and caretakers move in careful, unhurried lines, adjusting lamps, straightening offerings, refilling oil. Their robes are clean but practical, more work clothes than costume. One stifles a yawn behind his hand, then checks a lamp with renewed seriousness. Another smooths a wrinkled cloth as if appeasing a fussy guest. None of them crackle with terrifying power. They look like people who have spent a long time watching the same altar and have decided the gods probably prefer consistency to drama. Your host exchanges a few low words with an older priest whose beard is braided nicely. The priest turns to you and studies you for a heartbeat. Strange clothes, uncertain grip on the incense jar, shoulders creeping up with anxiety. Then he smiles, small and real, and holds out his hands. You surrender the jar. He opens it, and the scent rolls out fully, rich and deep, like sap warmed in the sun. Pinching a small lump of resin, he drops it into a shallow bowl of coals. Smoke rises at once in pale threads, curling and drifting around your face. It slips into your hair, brushes your cheeks, and spirals upward toward the square of darkening sky. The smell tugs your thoughts into slower circles, as if each worry has to stand in line and speak softly or be sent back outside. The priest presses the jar back to you, then gestures toward the altar and touches his own chest. You, small offering, big table. You suddenly feel absurdly empty-handed. Everyone here brings something that looks sensible. Grain, fruit, oil, careful cloth. You have nothing but travel dust and a heavy collection of unfinished problems. For a moment, panic flutters. You imagine being politely escorted out for failure to provide appropriate tribute. Your host notices the way you stiffen, of course. He picks up a bowl of grain from the altar's edge, pinches out a few kernels and lets them fall in a tiny golden scatter. Then he taps his chest and gives an easy little shrug. Just hello. Just thank you. The bowl is cool and surprisingly heavy when he nudges it toward you. Your hand wobbles once, then steadies. You take less grain than you think you should because it feels safer that way, and let it fall. The sound is barely there, a soft tick against stone. Still, the gesture lands inside you with more weight than makes sense, like dropping a little bundle of restless thoughts and watching them sit still for once. You breathe out without meaning to. The smoke catches that breath and folds it smoothly into its drifting. The older priest steps close enough that you can see the creases at the corners of his eyes. With 2 fingers, he very lightly touches your forehead, as if closing a tiny door that had been rattling in a draft. The touch is quick, almost casual, but something unclenches under your ribs anyway. Seen. Not measured, not judged, just noticed. He leads you to a low shelf along a wall where clay tablets lie in tidy rows. Most are dense with wedge marks. A few have narrow blank strips left at the edges. Taking a stylus, he presses a small cluster of new signs into one empty patch. 4 or 5 tiny impressions, quick and sure. Then he turns the tablet so you can see, taps the fresh marks and points at you, then toward the courtyard. You cannot read the script, but your host's pleased grin fills in the gap. He says a word that sounds like guest, another that feels like welcome. Whatever those wedges mean, they now hold a record of you were here. Strange clothes, clumsy offering, lingering incense and all. Not a legend, not a prophecy, just a line in the quiet ledger of people who have stood in this small, breathing square and exhaled. Back in the center of the courtyard, lamps flicker, lions guard the doorway, and whispered prayers ripple like very gentle waves against stone. Smoke threads its way between columns and out into the darkening sky. You stand still, jar warm in your hands, heart beating finely at the temple's speed. No thunder, no visions, only the soft permission to let your thoughts walk barefoot for a while, one slow, cool step at a time. You step out of the temple expecting your host beside you, but when you glance back, he is still inside, finishing one more quiet word with the priest, one more adjustment to a lamp. He catches your eye and waves you on with an easy flick of the hand that clearly means, you know the way now, just follow the lane. It's only a few turns. You accept the logic of the person who actually lives here and wander alone into the deepening dusk. Evening has settled over the city in a low, soft layer. The sky above the roofs fades from copper at the edges to deep blue overhead, where the first stars prick through. Lamps bloom in doorways. Smoke rises from ovens carrying the smell of bread and herbs. Voices drift along the walls in warm waves, quiet chatting, short laughs, the splash of water poured into jars. You turn into the lane you're sure you remember. Same reed mats overhead, same crack in the wall, same leaning jar like an old acquaintance. You pass the corner where children flicked shells, and the doorway where a woman once ground grain, now rinsing bowls instead. You walk with the casual confidence of someone convinced they cannot possibly be lost. Naturally, this is when the city politely rearranges itself. A junction appears that you do not recall. The lane divides into two narrow alleys, both lined with the same clay walls, both roofed with woven reeds, both bending away in equally confident curves. You stand in the middle, waiting for one to feel more familiar. Neither cooperates. Behind a wall, a pot clangs. A child squeals and is soothed. Someone laughs. You pick the left-hand alley simply because the light there looks a little softer. This lane feels closer to the backs of houses than the fronts. Doorways sit deeper in shadow. In one, a family eats around a low tray. In another, someone trims a lamp wick. Through quick gaps, you see courtyards, a goat tied by a post, a stack of reeds, a child asleep on a mat with one fist still wrapped around a toy. You just walk and listen to other people's evenings happening almost, but not quite, within reach. It takes a few turns before a small, cool thought settles behind your eyes. You no longer know where you are. The alley behind you curves out of sight. The alley ahead does the same. The river's hush is somewhere, but you can't swear which direction it lies. Panic doesn't leap, it just edges closer, like a cat deciding whether to jump on your lap. Your feet keep moving, because standing still makes the walls feel too close. Around the next bend, the alley widens just enough for a corner hearth. A woman crouches beside a clay pot, stirring slowly. The smell reaches you first, lentils, herbs, and the kind of simple warmth that makes your shoulders loosen without permission. She looks up, takes in your unfamiliar clothes and the lost, trying not to look lost face, and lets the corner of her mouth tip up. Without asking anything, she breaks a crust from a round of bread and holds it out, as casually as if you were a neighbor late for dinner. You take the bread, warm and rough in your hands, and attempt a tangled mix of words and gestures. The palm in your host's courtyard, the two sticky-fingered children, baskets of dates, weaving reeds, the temple, the river, the scribbled concept of over there somewhere, probably. She watches patiently, stirring all the while, then answers mostly with her hands. A thumb jerked firmly back the way you came. Not that direction. A dismissive wave toward a side passage, That way leads to nowhere useful. A looping gesture ahead, warning of more bends, followed by a tap to her own chest. She will walk with you part of the way. For now, she nudges the bread closer. Eat. You lean against the cool wall and chew slowly. The bread is smoky at the edges, soft inside, and more soothing than any map. The spoon knocks gently against the pot. A faint song drifts from an invisible courtyard. Smoke, lentils, and cooling clay wrap the corner in a sleepy pocket of air. The knot in your chest loosens. You are still technically lost, but it no longer feels like a crisis, just an extra loop in the path home that you didn't know you needed. When she rises, she wipes her hands on her robe, gives a brisk, approving nod, as if officially accepting you as tonight's stray, and steps into the alley. You fall in beside her, because follow the person who smells like stew feels like the wisest possible rule in any era. Your shadows stretch together along the clay walls as you walk. For a few gentle turns, you are no longer a misplaced traveler counting corners. You are simply someone being walked home a little more slowly than planned, in a city that, even when it lets you wander, seems determined not to let you wander alone. The woman leads you for a few more bends, her steps brisk and sure, your own a little more cautious. At one junction she pauses, listening not with her ears, but with something older, maybe the way the air moves, the distant splash of water, the direction of a cooking smell. She points ahead, then to the left, fingers drawing a simple little path in the air. You, there. She, back. Her stew is calling. Before she goes, she reaches up suddenly and adjusts the fold of your clothing the way someone might straighten a crooked collar on an old friend. Then she taps your chest once, firmly, gives a short, satisfied nod, and turns away, vanishing around the bend in 3 efficient strides. Just like that, you are alone again. Not abandoned, exactly, more like handed off to the next piece of the city. You take the direction she indicated and walk on. The lane widens unexpectedly into a small open space where the air feels thicker, damp with the smell of wet earth. You hear the rhythmic splash thump of something heavy and soft meeting wood. A moment later, you see it, a potter's wheel spinning like a slow coin on its side, clay rising in the center under a pair of steady hands. The potter is young, hair tied back, forearms streaked with mud up to the elbow. A shallow basin of water rests at their feet. Their toes nudge the wheel rhythmically, keeping it turning. Each time their fingers slide up the clay, the shapeless lump stretches, thins, becomes something more graceful than it has any right to be. Bowls and jars in various stages of drying line the wall behind them, each catching the light in its own quiet way. You hover at the edge of the space, trying not to look as fascinated as you feel and absolutely failing. The potter glances up, takes in your curiosity, and crooks a finger. Come closer. You oblige a little too quickly and nearly step into the splash zone. A fleck of wet clay leaps off the spinning form and lands on your tunic. The potter grins, not even trying to hide it, and some part of you suspects this happens to people a lot. Smoothly, they shift the finished piece to one side and reach for another lump. This time, instead of shaping it themselves, they slap it down on the center of the wheel and reach for your hands. Their palms are cool and damp as they position your fingers around the clay. It feels like holding a sleepy animal. Not exactly cooperative, but not resisting either, just waiting to see what you'll do. The wheel begins to turn under your foot, guided by a nudge from theirs. At first, the clay threatens to topple, leaning wildly, wobbling like a drunk trying to remember how standing works. Your hands tighten, which makes things worse. The potter murmurs something low, amused, and lightly presses your wrists downward. Less panic, more patience. The wheel hums softly, a gentle whir that seems to buzz through your bones. Under your fingers, the clay slowly calms, thickening into a squat cylinder. You try to pull it taller and instantly overdo it. The top flops to one side like a hat in a strong wind. You wince. The potter laughs, not unkindly. With practiced ease, they slide their hands over yours, nudging, smoothing, coaxing the clay back into something vaguely symmetrical. Not perfect, but no longer a complete disaster. If you squint, it could be a cup, or a jar, or something. They take their hands away, letting yours float just above the surface. The wheel turns and you watch the misshapen little form rotate, each side a slightly different version of almost right. In your head, you hear the elder by the canal again. The river only becomes useful when guided through small, daily adjustments. Maybe clay is just river that forgot how to run. When the potter finally stops the wheel, they lift the damp piece carefully and set it on a board with the other newborn vessels. With a quick, decisive motion, they press a little mark into the base, a simple zigzag and a tiny palm frond shape. Then they point from the mark to your chest, then toward the alley. Your symbol, your path. Your cricket jar now has a tiny memory baked into it even before it meets any actual fire. On the other side of the courtyard, someone clears their throat. You turn to see another craftsperson seated at a low bench, a damp clay tablet across their knees. A stylus rests in their hand. Rows of tiny wedges already march across the surface, neat and stubborn. Their hair is streaked with gray, though their hands move with quick, precise energy. They've been watching the whole clay wrestling show with openly entertained eyes. They beckon you over and tap a blank strip at the edge of the tablet. Then they gesture, with rapid economy, toward the spinning wheel, the jars, the alley, your chest. Their mouth curves in a small, conspiratorial smile. The potter shapes clay. They shape memory. They tilt their head, waiting. What shall we remember? You fumble for ideas, then resort to gestures again. You trace the outline of a palm, tap your own head, mime a couple of small children tugging your sleeves, draw a tiny square for the courtyard, a crooked line for the canal, a bump for the little oven. The scribe watches, eyes bright, as if genuinely delighted by your attempts at charades. Then they begin to write, stylus clicking softly as it bites into the clay. You can't read the script, of course, but you recognize patterns, repeated clusters, short gaps where your gestures were especially chaotic and required editorial mercy. When they're done, they mark a small palm frond symbol at the end, the same one the potter pressed into your jar. They tap the symbol, tap your chest, then point down the alley you came from and another one running at a right angle. It clicks slowly. In a city where walls and lanes and shadows repeat like a pattern on a mat, people carve their directions into clay and into habit. Addresses here are not numbers, they're descriptions. The courtyard with the palm, the house of the reed weavers, the lane that smells like figs at sunset. The scribe is writing your host's world onto the tablet in tiny wedges, turning a feeling of over there somewhere into something the city can carry and remember. They hold the tablet up to you, the fresh marks still glistening. You study the clusters, trying to imagine the story they tell. A river, a channel, a courtyard, a palm, a family, and one confused guest who keeps turning the wrong corner. The scribe signs the bottom with their own mark, then hands the tablet to a teenager who has just darted in from the alley with the energy of a thrown pebble. The teenager tucks the tablet under one arm and grabs a still damp jar from the potter with the other, carrying memory and clay in the same trip. They glance at you and jerk their chin with the universal teenage expression of, "Fine, come on then." You fall in beside them, your jar symbol and palm symbol now gently vibrating in the back of your thoughts like quiet bells. As you walk, they point out small, unnoticed landmarks, a crack in a wall shaped like a fish, a door where the lintel wood has a twist, a roof where one mat always sags just a little. None of it would mean anything on a grand map, but for someone who walks these lanes daily, they are anchors, small hooks that keep the whole maze from drifting apart. After 3 turns, maybe 4, you've stopped counting. You smell it before you see it, the faint sweetness of dates and the smoky ghost of yesterday's bread. The teenager grins and lifts the tablet briefly as if to say, "See, it works." Ahead, the lane opens just enough that you can glimpse the upper fronds of the familiar palm leaning over a wall, like a friend stretching to see who's at the door. You step into the courtyard, and everything in you unclenches by a few quiet degrees. The palm, the oven, the low bench, the water jar, they all slot back into the right places in your mind. Your hostess looks up from where she's mending a cloth, takes in the clay streak on your sleeve, the faint wildness in your eyes, and the teenager at your side, then lifts one eyebrow. Of course you got lost. Of course some part of the city escorted you home. The teenager deposits the tablet on a shelf near the doorway with a soft thud. The scribe's wedges stare up calmly, ready to dry into permanent memory. Somewhere in that cluster of signs, your wandering path lives now too, a crooked little line baked into their records. You reach automatically for the water bowl, the coolness familiar against your fingers, and think how comforting it is that in a world made of dust and change, someone is always spinning clay and scratching lines, quietly insisting that nothing, not even a misplaced traveler, has to vanish completely. By the time the sun leans low again, the courtyard has that soft golden look that forgives almost everything. Cracks blur into gentle lines, baskets seem deliberately placed, and even your crooked mat under its bowl of dates passes for style. Your hostess scatters a last handful of grain for the hens. Your host rinses his hands at the water jar, and the children argue with alarming passion about who gets to hold your sleeve. Somehow you have become part guest and part household pet. Your host settles the matter with the same quiet authority he uses on irrigation ditches. He plants one small hand on each of your sleeves, checks that you are properly balanced with child on either side, and nods, satisfied. Like that, you step into the lane as if escorted by a very short honor guard. The streets have exhaled. Midday's glare has softened into amber. Shadows stretch long along the mud brick, and the air smells of cooling clay, distant stew, and that faint damp note that always means water is near. He leads you down a lane you haven't taken before, this one sloping just enough that your feet feel the tilt before your eyes catch the narrow strip of dark ahead. The alley opens onto a canal, smooth and dusk-colored, carrying a thin ribbon of sky on its back. Low wooden boats rest along the bank, ropes looped around short stakes. Gardens lean right up to the water's edge, rows of vegetables, small fruit trees, clumps of mint dangling over like nosy neighbors. Somewhere upriver, a bird calls once, lazily, as if reminding everyone that night is almost here. Your host steps into one of the smaller boats with unthinking balance and offers you his hand. The children hop in first, obviously, making the hull wobble just enough that your entire nervous system files a complaint. For a heartbeat, you picture yourself sliding into the canal, sandals gone, pride sinking near the reeds. His grip tightens. His other hand presses lightly on your shoulder, nudging you to bend your knees. You obey. The boat rocks once, twice, then settles under your weight like a patient animal. The children grin. Congratulations, you have passed the "does not capsize us" test. With a slow push of the pole, your host eases the boat away from the bank. The city tilts. Now you are looking up at walls and doorways and palm crowns instead of along them. Lamps are being lit near the water, each one appearing twice. One steady flame on the wall, one shivering twin in the canal. The pole touches the bed with a soft scrape every few breaths. Between strokes, the boat glides in long, quiet moments. At the bow, the children hover their fingers above the surface, whisper rules, and inevitably start humming. At first, their tunes collide, but your host's voice slips in underneath, low and steady, and the melody finds its shape. You catch only a few words: river, palm, house, night. But the feeling is clear. This is a song for moving, not performing. You drift past the backs of courtyards you've only known from the lane, glimpsing small private worlds. Steps dipping into the canal, jars lined along a wall, a goat tied by a post, mats folded and waiting for sleep. A woman rinses pots and tips the water back into the canal, sending silver ripples toward your hull. Halfway along, the pole snags. Your host plants it, pushes, and instead of the familiar smooth slide, the boat gives a stubborn little jerk and stops. Silt and reeds have gathered into a quiet knot on the canal floor, and your boat has found the exact middle of it. The children grab the sides. Your stomach does an unnecessary somersault. For a heartbeat, you imagine everyone climbing out into mud and dragging the boat like a sulking donkey. Your host only sighs, crouches, shifts the angle of the pole, and begins a slow, practiced rocking. The boat tilts gently to one side, then the other. Water slaps softly, reeds brush the hull, and the pole finally slips free with a small underwater sigh. The boat glides forward again. The children cheer as if a monster has been defeated, and your host flicks a few drops of water at them, adding a playful new line to the song about proud mud. Ahead, a thin, wandering flute melody appears from around the bend and begins to match the slow rhythm of your ride. The canal widens where several channels meet, and stone steps rise from the water to a small landing with a few hanging lanterns. Beyond the wall, you recognize the tops of palms and the familiar slope of rooftops. Your host gives one last gentle push, guiding the boat to the lowest step. You stand more steadily this time while the children hop out and race upward, already turning the little snag into a heroic adventure. You glance back once at the dark ribbon of water sliding between gardens, then breathe in the cool, damp air and follow them toward the lamplight. The steps carry you up out of the canal dusk and into a different kind of evening. The first thing you notice is the light, not just from doorways and ovens now, but from strings of small clay lamps hung along walls and stretched between palms. Their flames dot the air like low, wandering stars, wobbling faintly whenever someone passes too quickly underneath. You recognize the corner before you recognize the faces. There's the crooked wall, the jar with its forever tilted neck, the sagging patch of reed roofing you've learned to duck under. Only tonight, the jar's neck wears a ring of fresh palm fronds and flowers, and the sagging reed patch is hung with little strips of cloth that flicker in the lamplight. The lane has been rearranged into a narrow festival, like someone gently folded celebration into the everyday clay. Your host's children tear ahead, of course, nearly colliding with a neighbor balancing a tray of little clay bowls. She steadies her load with the reflexes of someone used to both children and gravity. When she sees you, her face opens into a grin that says, "Ah, there you are. The city hasn't eaten you." She lifts the tray just enough for you to see what it carries. Something dark and glossy that clings to the bowl's insides like slow honey. Date syrup, thick and sun-sweet. You reach to help, but before you can take the tray, she shifts it away with practiced ease and assigns you a different task. A handful of palm fronds smacked gently against your chest. She points up to a naked patch of wall between two lamps, and then to a cluster of fronds already tied in overlapping fans. Decoration duty. You, reluctant interior designer. The fronds feel cool and slightly damp in your hands, their midribs firm under your fingers. You watch how others tie them. A twist of fiber here, a knot around a peg there. Nothing complicated, just repetition. Your first attempt sags with the enthusiasm of a tired cat. A neighbor reaches up, tightens the knot, and gives your work an approving little pat, like someone consoling an underachieving but beloved plant. "Good," his eyes say. "Festive, but definitely made by you." As you keep working, more people spill into the lane. The flour-dusted baker appears with a basket of smaller, slightly sweet breads, each stuffed with chopped dates. The potter from earlier comes carrying a stack of shallow dishes, still faintly cool from drying. The teenager who escorted you home with the tablet zips through the crowd, dropping small pieces of dried fruit into random palms before vanishing again. You realize with a slow warmth that you are starting to recognize people in this supposedly ancient city the way you recognize regulars at your modern coffee shop. Music eases into the space almost without you noticing when it began. A drum, small and handheld, pulses gently near the end of the lane. A flute weaves a thin line of notes above it. No one declares the festival officially started. Instead, the volume lifts by degrees as conversations overlap, lanterns swing, and a breeze threads through carrying the smells of oil, smoke, dates, and crushed mint. Someone presses a cup into your hand. Pottery, faintly textured, cool beneath your fingers. Inside is water flavored with something green and sharp. You take a cautious sip. Mint and another herb you can't name slide across your tongue, clean and bright, cutting through the day's dust. You realize you were thirstier than you knew. Your host watches your expression, then raises his own cup in a small toast. You clink gently, trying not to chip anything older than your entire family tree. In the center of the lane, beneath the largest overhanging palm, a circle opens almost by instinct. Children dart through with embarrassing energy. Older folks settle on mats pushed against the walls. Your crooked date mat has been promoted to the honorable post of snack station. Your lopsided weave almost hidden under piles of fruit and small breads. You are absurdly proud, the way you might be if your terrible drawing from kindergarten were hung in the living room. The problem arrives, as problems often do, disguised as enthusiasm. One of the smaller children, a cousin of someone or the neighbor's youngest, gets very excited about a lantern hanging just high enough to be almost reachable. They tug the rope once, twice, thrilled with the way the light swings. On the third tug, the knot gives up. The lantern drops, flame and all, directly toward a mat, a bowl, and two very surprised feet. For a single stretched heartbeat, every muscle in your body launches a disaster montage. Fire, shouting, upended festival, time traveler responsible for burning down half of ancient Mesopotamia. The lantern hits the mat with a soft thud and tips. Oil sloshes, Flame licks dangerously toward the reeds, then a hand swoops in. Your hostess, who has been in 3 places at once all evening, is suddenly exactly here. She flips the lantern upright with a practiced twist that would make modern firefighters applaud, snuffs the stray flame with the wrung-out edge of a damp cloth, and checks the mat with a quick pat-pat. A few singed fibers, nothing more. She rounds on the child with eyebrows raised to a level that clearly transcends culture and era. The child's shoulders climb toward their ears. For a second you expect scolding that might crack the clay walls. Instead, she exhales through her nose, pulls the child gently into her side, and folds their small fingers around the lantern's rope. Then, slowly, deliberately, she demonstrates. A tiny sway, not a wild swing. A lamp is for guiding, she seems to say, not for seeing how close you can get to chaos. Around you, conversations restart, tension dissolving into chuckles, and a few exaggerated retellings of the dramatic near miss. Someone slaps your host's shoulder and mimes the lantern falling, turning it into a story already growing funnier with each retelling. The child, now carefully supervised, helps rehang the lamp at a safer angle, cheeks flushed, but eyes still bright. No festival canceled, no time traveler deported back to his century in disgrace, just one more tale to fold into later evenings. As the night deepens, the circle beneath the palm tightens. People shift on mats, drawing closer as cooler air creeps in. Someone starts a story. You can't follow every detail, but the rhythm is unmistakable. A foolish trader, a clever woman, a river that refuses to do what it's told. Laughter comes in waves at all the right places. At one point, your host leans over to whisper a simplified version into your ear, gesturing with his hands when words fail. You end up laughing a half-beat late, but the warmth in your chest is right on time. You lose track of how many small breads you eat, how many times your cup is refilled, how many lanterns sway gently above you like drowsy fireflies caught in clay. When you tilt your head back, palm fronds frame a sky scattered with stars, their points softened by the thin veil of smoke and heat. The city doesn't feel like a backdrop anymore. It feels like a house with many rooms, and tonight you've been invited into the one where people gather when they want to remember that under all the work and dust, there is still room for light, sweetness, and the shared relief of narrowly avoiding setting the neighborhood on fire. The night doesn't stop, it softens. Neighbors collect bowls and mats, scoop up limp, half-asleep children, and vanish into shadowy doorways. Lanterns are pinched out until only a few tired halos glow in the lane, like little moons too stubborn to sleep. Your host surveys the crumbs and the faintly singed mat from the lantern incident, huffs a quiet laugh, then flicks his chin toward the house. Inside, instead of more chores, he leads you to a narrow stair tucked into a corner. He taps his chest, taps yours, and points upward, the ancient equivalent of, "Your room is this way." You climb, one hand on the wall, your sandals whispering on worn stone. With each step, the street noises fall away, voices thinning, a last pot set down, a door closing with a soft thud. You duck through a low opening and step onto the flat roof. The city you've been wandering all day has rearranged itself into a different shape, a patchwork of low, square rooftops stretching in every direction. Here and there, a lamp still burns, haloed by figures settling on mats. The lanes between houses are black seams. Beyond the last roofs, palms stand like dark feathers against the horizon, and past them, the river shows as one faint silver streak. Above, the sky is ridiculous. Stars crowd every scrap of darkness, sharper and brighter than anything above your modern, light-polluted world. It feels as if someone crushed a jar of salt and scattered it over black silk. For a moment, you just stand there, breathing cool air, your chest filling with something that isn't quite joy and isn't quite sadness, just a wide, deep quiet. Your hostess is already up here, of course. She moves briskly across the roof, unrolling mats, straightening edges, nudging children into reasonable places. The children themselves vibrate at that dangerous frequency between exhausted and feral. One tries to claim your entire sleeping spot until a single raised eyebrow from their mother relocates them with impressive speed. You're given a place near the low parapet where you can lie back and see both the sky and, if you tilt your head, the little square of courtyard below. Your crooked mat from earlier is laid proudly on top of a thicker one, like a slightly wonky crown. A jug of water and a small bowl of leftover bread and dates appear at your elbow. No one announces it, but the message is clear. If you wake up thirsty or hungry, the roof has you covered. Your host lowers himself beside you with a satisfied groan, folds his hands behind his head, and stares up at the stars as if they're a story he's read 1,000 times and never gotten bored of. Around you, other roofs are doing the same thing. Shapes lying down, last conversations dwindling, the city's volume turned almost to zero. From the direction of the temple, a drum beats very slowly, so distant and soft that it might be the city's own heartbeat. With nothing left to do but breathe, your thoughts finally catch up. All day you've been busy, not drowning in canals, not dropping clay, not setting streets on fire, learning how to live inside other people's routines. Now, under this arrogant sky, a more familiar worry creeps in. How long do you get to keep this? When you slip back into your own time, will these palms and courtyards feel real or like something your brain invented between emails and alarms? Apparently, your face betrays you. Your host turns his head, studies you for a heartbeat, then quietly says your name, wrapping it in his accent. He taps his chest, sweeps his hand to include roof, house, lane, palm line, river, then points up at the stars and taps his chest again. This is his home, the gesture says. Then he taps your shoulder and folds you into the same motion. For now, this home is holding you too. You try to explain the modern obsession with guarantees, return tickets, reservations, digital proof that you can come back whenever you like. You mime walking away, then looking back over your shoulder with theatrical longing. You pinch your fingers together as if holding a tiny palm tree and tuck it into an imaginary pocket. Your host watches, amused, then touches your forehead lightly with 2 fingers, just as the priest did. He points at the stars and traces a small circle over his closed eyes. Dreams, his hands say. What enters there doesn't need doors or dates. The asleep children pop up again like startled birds. One points at a bright cluster of stars and whispers fiercely. The other adds big swooping gestures. Your hostess chuckles, lies back, and begins drawing shapes in the air above them, connecting invisible lines. A river, a palm, a house, a little square that must be this roof. Without sharing a language, you still know exactly what she's mapping. Your host nudges your elbow until you join in, feeling silly and strangely moved. You lift your hand and make your own little constellation tour. The crooked mat, the boat snagged in the canal, the lantern that nearly reinvented the festival as a bonfire, the lopsided clay jar with your mark. You trace each shape in the stars. He nods along solemnly, as if approving your very personal astronomy. Gradually, the tightness under your ribs loosens. The distant drum becomes background, your breath sliding into the same slow rhythm. Rooftops settle. Someone laughs quietly and then goes quiet for good. The breeze cools, brushing your hair, tugging the edge of your blanket like a gentle reminder to stop thinking. Your eyes grow heavy. The stars blur at the edges, turning from pinpoints into soft dust. Palm fronds at the roof's edge move like slow fingers turning the last pages of a book. Warm mud brick holds your back. Cool night presses softly against your face. Between them, on your slightly crooked, very promoted mat, you lie listening to Mesopotamia breathe, until, without noticing exactly when it happens, you breathe out once and don't bother to chase the next thought. Cold air brushes your face and nudges you awake. Above you, palm fronds frame a sky still more night than morning, except for a thin line of gray where the horizon has started to soften. The rooftop is a quiet tangle of blankets in small sleeping shapes. Somewhere below, the city lies curled on its side, breathing slowly. Your hostess is already at your feet, wrapped in neat, as if dawn has politely knocked just for her. She smooths your blanket, taps your shoulder twice, and tips her head toward the stair. Your host sits nearby with his sandals on, children collapsed over his lap at improbable angles. When your eyes meet, he sketches a small circle in the air and points downward. One last round. You stand, blanket around your shoulders, feeling half human, half wandering cloak. Before you can find your sandals, your hostess presses a cloth bundle into your hand. Still warm bread and 2 mashed dates clinging to each other. She closes your fingers around it and gives your knuckles a quick squeeze. No speech, just the quiet message you now recognize here. This will have to be enough. The stairwell is cool and narrow, smelling of smoke, clay, and last night's lamps. When you step into the lane, the city feels oddly gentle, as if someone has drawn over all its sharp lines with charcoal. Lamps burn low in a few doorways. Somewhere, a pot clinks, a jar scrapes stone, a single cough echoes and dies. Above, the last stars linger stubbornly, refusing to clock out until the sun actually shows up. Your host walks beside you without speaking, hands tucked into his belt, blanket over one shoulder. First, he turns toward the baker's corner. The oven mouth is dark, but a thin thread of smoke leaks from the top. The baker leans against the wall with his arms folded, head tipped back. One eye opens a slit as you approach, then both when he recognizes you. He snorts, pushes off the wall, and mimes slapping dough against hot clay, exaggerating your earlier hesitation. You protest by trying to shape something almost round with your hands. He answers with a perfect circle drawn in the air, then grins, taps his chest, and flicks his fingers outward. No words you share, but you hear it clearly. If you ever wander back here, come hungry. You walk onto the canal. The water is dark glass, carrying a faint ribbon of paling sky. Boats bump softly against their ropes, reeds whisper along the bank, and some unseen bird mutters complaints about the hour. At the spot where your boat lodged stubbornly in the mud, your host pauses and taps the pole, the mooring stone, then your foot, his mouth twitching. You, stuck. Pole, patient. River, forgiving. The story is already shrinking into something funny. A little farther along, the irrigation elder sits on his usual stone, wrapped in a cloak, watching the river decide how bright to become. You half suspect he never actually leaves this spot, only changes blankets with the seasons. When he sees you, he lifts his reed in greeting like a tiny, lazy banner. You sit beside him. The stone is cold and steady under you, more anchoring than most things in your own time. His words are soft, mostly eaten by the water, but his hands draw simple shapes you've learned to read. Palm sweeping from dark to light, finger tracing a loop for nights, floods, years circling back. He taps the river, gestures vaguely toward the hidden fields, then touches two fingers to your chest. Things arrive, things leave, and sometimes they return as something else. At the end, he presses the reed into your hand. You try to return it. He folds your fingers around it with surprising strength. Your host chuckles and mimes tapping your own forehead with it like a gentle reminder. Guide this the way we guide water. You walk back through lanes that already feel like memories being filed away. The corner where stew once perfumed the air is quiet now, hearth cold, wood stacked neatly for later. The potter's yard is still. The wheel sleeps under a cloth. Jars wait in rows, catching the first gray light on their damp shoulders. Somewhere inside, a clay tablet is drying with your little palm frond mark pressed into it, your wandering turned into careful wedges. In one doorway, a familiar head appears. The lantern child, hair sticking up like startled straw, lamp clutched at a safely ridiculous distance from anything flammable. When they recognize you, they wave with their whole arm and say something quick and proud that can only mean, "No fires!" You clap a hand to your heart and stagger back in exaggerated relief. Their grin explodes across their face. This will clearly be their favorite story for years. By the time your host turns you back toward his own lane, the gray at the horizon has melted into the first doubtful blue. A rooster finally remembers its job and shouts about it. Thin smoke threads rise from a few ovens. Somewhere, a bucket knocks against the lip of a well. The city is stretching, ready to step back into its bright, busy self, the version of it that will carry on whether you are here to see it or not. At the courtyard doorway, he pauses, palm resting on the frame. For a moment, he looks back down the lane, eyes following the invisible path of your little farewell circuit. The baker, the water, the old man, the sleeping hearths and covered wheels. Then he turns and rests that same hand briefly on your shoulder with a small, firm squeeze. No speech, no ceremony, just the steady message you've heard all day. You saw us, we saw you, and that is enough. Inside, almost everything is as you left it. The palm still rises from its square of soil. The oven still holds a faint, stored warmth. Your crooked mat still carries its proud bowl of dates, only a few mysteriously missing. Above, the muffled thump of small feet on the roof says the children are waking. Your hostess stands by the water jar, rinsing cups in slow, practiced motions, as if you might sit down and use one of them again. You pause on the threshold and draw one long, patient breath, letting the scene sink into you as completely as it can. Mud brick and palm shade, the ghost of lamp smoke, the humming sweetness of dates, the soft drip of water from jar to bowl. Each detail drops into place somewhere deep, like silt settling through clear canal water. You don't know exactly how you'll leave or who you'll be when you tell this story to yourself later, but you know that somewhere in your mind there will always be this small square of Mesopotamian morning, its door left permanently, stubbornly ajar. You don't sit down. Something in you understands that if you sink onto the mat again, if you reach for one more date or one more crust of bread, this day will simply loop, and you might never find the thin edge where leaving fits. You stand there in the doorway, fingers brushing the rough frame, feeling the courtyard breathe around you one more time. Your hostess wipes her hands on her robe and comes to stand in front of you. She studies your face with the same efficient attention she's given baskets, mats, dough, and children. Whatever she sees there makes the corner of her mouth soften. She reaches up and straightens your hair, then your collar. Then, because apparently some things are universal, she brushes an invisible crumb from your cheek. Time-traveling guest or not, no one leaves her house looking like they picked a fight with a breadbasket. Then she crosses to the little shelf by the wall and picks something up. When she returns, she opens your hand and presses a small bundle into it. A short twist of woven reed, no larger than your thumb, with a single date stone tied in the middle. The reed is pale and smooth, the knot tight, the seed glossy and dark. It's nothing heavy, nothing expensive, just two scraps of their everyday work folded into something deliberate. She taps the bundle, taps your heart, then lifts her hand toward the sky. You don't need translation. A tiny piece of this place, carried where you'll remember it. You close your fingers around it carefully, as if it might vanish if you squeeze too hard. It's so light you barely feel the weight, and yet your throat behaves as if she's just handed you a brick of pure sentiment. Your host appears at your side, having wrangled the children into something loosely resembling clothing and sandals. One child charges toward you and wraps both arms around your waist in a hug so abrupt you rock back a step. The other pretends they are too old for this, but still grips your wrist like it might slip away without permission. Your host lays one broad hand on each small head, and with his free hand he gestures toward the lane. This time you don't try to memorize every turn, you just walk. Past the doorway where the lantern nearly reinvented itself as a meteor. Past the corner where the stew once perfumed the air, now calm and swept. Past the little roof edge where you tied your very questionable palm decorations, now hanging with an almost dignified droop. The city moves around you in its gentle pre-morning rush. Water carried, ovens lit, a donkey protesting the concept of work yet again. At one bend, the teenager who once marched you home with the clay tablet appears from nowhere, as teenagers do. They fall in step for a few strides, eyes flicking to your closed hand. You open your fingers just enough to show the reed and date stone. They grin, recognizing the handiwork, and draw a small palm frond shape in the air with one finger, the same mark stamped on the base of your lopsided jar, scratched into the tablet, pressed into the memory of this neighborhood. You now, a tiny symbol in their quiet map. The lane slopes slightly, and the air grows thinner, edged with the smell of open land. The high walls begin to break apart. The reed mats overhead disappear, leaving the sky bigger and paler. The hum of the river fades behind you into a soft, distant shush. After so much wandering and tight curves and hidden corners, the straight, open stretch ahead feels almost shocking, like stepping from a crowded room into a wide field. The gate stands where you first found it. Thick wooden doors, metal bands dull in the early light, one leaf pulled inward just enough for people to pass. Outside, the land rolls gently away in sand and scrub and scattered palms. Inside, the city gathers around its own warmth, courtyards nestling against each other like sleepers on a shared roof. Between those two worlds, the gate beam waits, the same piece of wood you ducked under when you first arrived, with dust in your throat and too many questions in your eyes. The guard is there too, leaning on his spear, cloak wrapped tight against the morning chill. When he sees you, his eyebrows climb a fraction. Visitors who arrive dusty and uncertain and then actually come back out again are clearly less common than the other way around. His gaze flicks over your shoulder to your hosts. They nod once, a tiny exchange of trust passing between people who share a city, a river, and 100 unspoken agreements. You step forward, suddenly aware of your feet, of how each sandal scuffs the earth. The world beyond the gate wavers slightly in the early light, as if it hasn't quite decided what shape to take. The guard lifts his spear a little, more in salute than in warning, and says something in a low voice, too soft for you to catch. But your host answers with a short, amused reply. You suspect it's something like, "Yes, we're really letting this one go." Your hostess moves to stand beside you, palm hovering just behind your back but not touching. The children press in at your sides, a little wall of elbows and sticky fingers. For a moment, no one insists that you move. The city doesn't shove you away. The outside world doesn't drag you forward. You just exist in the doorway, breathing the air of both. You turn back one last time. From here, the lane looks narrow, unremarkable. Just another strip of mud brick and shadow in a whole maze of similar streets. You cannot see the palm in the courtyard, the oven, the crooked mat, the clay tablet, the jar with your mark, the reed channels, the boat snag, the almost fire, the rooftop sky. But you know exactly where they sit, stacked inside your memory like nested bowls. You understand suddenly that this is how places live when you're gone, not as postcards or perfect pictures, but as small, overlapping sensations. Warm bread on your fingertips, cool water on your wrists, smoke in your hair, a reed tucked in your palm. You lift your hand in a clumsy wave. Your host answers with a steadier one. Your hostess gives a short, purposeful nod, as if approving the way you're finally standing. The children press into your sides, a little wall of elbows and sticky fingers. For a moment, no one insists that you move. The city doesn't shove you away. The outside world doesn't drag you forward. You just exist in the doorway, breathing the air of both. You turn back one last time. From here, the lane looks narrow, unremarkable, just another strip of mud brick and shadow in a whole maze of similar streets. You cannot see the palm in the courtyard, the oven, the crooked mat, the clay tablet, the jar with your mark, the reed channels, the boat snag, the almost fire, the rooftop sky. But you know exactly where they sit, stacked inside your memory like nested bowls. You lift your hand in a clumsy wave. Your host answers with a steadier one. Your hostess gives a short, purposeful nod, as if approving the way you're finally standing. The children wave both arms and shout something that probably means, "Come back and don't fall in the river and remember our lamp," all at once. The guard snorts, amused and fond, and half salutes you with the butt of his spear. There is no flash, no thunderclap, no dramatic tearing of worlds. The city doesn't vanish. It simply slips behind you, one heartbeat at a time. The sounds fade, voices, clatter, distant drums, until they're just echoes folded into the soft rush of your own breathing. The air changes from warm clay and dates to whatever waits wherever you are now. Your blanket, your pillow, the faint whir of your fan. Only your hand remains exactly as it was, fingers closed around a tiny twist of reed and a single glossy date stone. You don't need to open your palm to know it's still there. You can feel it in your chest, in the slow, steady way your breath moves, matching a rhythm you learned somewhere between river and rooftop. The road ahead, whether it's a hallway, a busy day, or just the short journey between waking and sleep, seems a little less sharp around the edges. Somewhere deep inside, a city of mud brick and palm shade goes on cooking, weaving, praying, arguing about bread, laughing about lanterns, and guiding its river with small, patient hands, not particularly bothered by whether you are watching or not. You carry it anyway, invisible and intact, as you drift away. The air around you is quieter now, like the city has gently closed its door, leaving a slice of warm light under the frame just for you. You can still feel the cool stone of the rooftop under your back, even though you're lying wherever you are, in your own bed, your own time. You can still see the faint silver ribbon of the canal even with your eyes closed. You can still hear the soft drum, the reeds brushing the boat, the low, amused voices of people who accepted you without needing to understand you perfectly. Let those sounds sink deeper until they're not things you're listening to, just part of the background hum inside your chest. Let the palm fronds sway once more above you, slow and steady, like a hand moving back and forth in front of your eyes, telling them it's all right to grow heavy. Picture the courtyard at dawn, doorway half open, oven still warm, a small bowl of dates resting on your crooked mat. Nothing is happening there that needs your attention. The bread will be baked, the water carried, the songs hummed, whether you watch or not. If any stray worry tries to tug at your sleeve, you can hand it to the river. Imagine it as a little clump of silt pressed between your fingers and dropped gently into the slow current. Watch the circles widen, then smooth out, leaving the surface as calm as before. You don't need to fix anything right now. You don't need to remember every detail. The story will remember itself for you. Feel the weight, light as it is, of the reed and date stone in your hand, real or imagined. That tiny knot can be your marker, your little symbol scratched into the clay tablet of tonight. It says you were here, you wandered, you were welcomed, and you can return in dreams whenever you like. You only have to close your eyes and step back under that gate again. Let your shoulders soften into whatever you're lying on. Let your jaw unclench, your hands uncurl just enough to be loose, but still holding that small token. Breathe in like you're filling a clay jar, slowly from the bottom up. Breathe out like pouring that water gently back into a quiet channel. No rush, no effort, just the rhythm of a city by a tame river, moving at its own unbothered speed. And as you float here, half in your room and half somewhere near the date palm courtyards, you can allow the edges of everything to blur. The day you had, the day ahead, the exact line between now and then. They can all rest for a while on a low rooftop where the stars shine far too brightly and everyone eventually falls asleep under the same wide, ancient sky. End of story. Sweet dreams.